They watched the last suns die in silence. Massive constructs, older than memory, drifted through systems stripped of physics. The stars themselves had begun to disobey the laws written into reality. It started with minor fluctuations, gravitational inconsistencies, particles reversing spin without cause. Then entire equations collapsed. And as the core logic of existence began to unravel, the oldest races panicked. The Drexery fell first. Their citadel worlds, fortified across 6 dimensions, folded inward like paper burned from the inside. What remained was not debris, not corpses, not even silence, just a lingering mathematical absence, an echo that bent sensors and drove minds mad. The Zurith, masters of genetic ascendancy, unleashed their superminds. Each had solved death, entropy, and probability, but they could not solve this. They tried to speak to it, understand it, predict it. It responded by erasing their language from history itself. Their oldest records now read static. In the deepest temples of the Runkel pantheon, the gods themselves began to fracture. Thought beings woven from psionic plasma worship across the spiral arms. They screamed as their worshippers disappeared mid-prayer. 12 pantheons, 100 billion faithful, all gone in seconds. Nothing answered the gods' pleas. The coalition of living minds, the last alliance, convened one final time. Their reality anchor had begun to flicker. Time within their bastion moved in strange ways. Some rooms aged 1,000 years per step. Others froze entirely. Their leaders, thousands of species, all brilliant in their own fields, admitted what no species had said aloud. This was not a war. It was an unmaking. Creation itself was being devoured. They needed something outside the known, something older than terror. Records from the deep archive were recovered. Entire sections were redacted by gods now dead. But scattered among corrupted logs and forbidden files was one name, one reference that had survived trillions of cycles. A warning encoded in 1,000,000 tongues. Do not awaken humanity. They laughed at first. Humanity was a myth, a bedtime horror. The monsters used to frighten children of stars. But as the destruction spread faster than light, belief came quickly. The legend spoke of a species born too cruel, too curious, too stubborn to be destroyed. A species that had broken time, killed gods, and then vanished voluntarily. Their final message to the galaxy, before sealing themselves away, was one simple statement. If we return, it's because you made a mistake. Now, the coalition stood before that mistake. The chamber was built in another age. Buried beneath a dead moon, it was wrapped in null fields so dense even reality hesitated. The activation switch required 13 sacrifices, one from each of the original dominions that had banished humanity. The rituals were specific, not mystical, mathematical. Each action, each death, coded into the prison's protocol. They argued. Some begged not to proceed, but the destruction approached. Nothing else remained. They did not choose to awaken humanity. They had no choice. The activation began. No light, no sound, no drama, just a sudden presence. The air grew thicker. A pressure not physical, but conceptual. Reality tightened, like a breath held too long. And then something shifted. A signal. Simple. Binary. It translated itself instantly into every tongue. Context received. Threat level confirmed. Directive accepted. No name. No face. Just a response. A calm acknowledgement that something terrible had been noticed. One of the elder beings, a telepath with the mind strength of a neutron star, reached toward it. The moment his thoughts touched the signal, his consciousness was reduced to symbols. Not pain. Not death. He became a mathematical function. And then nothing. Then the signal expanded. Across dead stars and broken systems, ancient satellites blinked to life. They had no origin. None had been seen before. But they knew where to go. The coordinates of the dying. The epicenters of entropy. They moved without propulsion, without delay. Time obeyed them. The coalition watched. The signal spread not through space, but through the gaps in logic, through the broken constants. It infected the very framework of existence. The enemy noticed. For the first time, it responded. No longer devouring blindly, it paused, shifted, and for the first time hesitated. Then came the first vessel. It emerged from nothing, a void that had no coordinates. Not cloaked, not hidden. Outside, it looked almost human in design, if humans had embraced madness and function over aesthetics. A jagged spear of mass logic, hull coated in condensed language. The ship spoke with its existence. Every sensor failed. The gods, those who remained as fractured echoes, began to scream. A second ship followed. Then a fleet. Hundreds. Thousands. No identification. No markings. Just one shared broadcast. Response protocol, Leviathan. And with that, the war began. Except it was not war. Not by human standards. It was extermination. Where the enemy devoured logic, the human vessels rewrote it. Fields of combat where causality had failed were restructured. Planets consumed by probability voids were restored. Partially, imperfectly, but alive. Weapons were not fired. They were deployed. Each strike reasserted reality. Each impact rewrote the battlefield. And every time a vessel fell, a new one emerged. Sometimes the same design. Sometimes completely different. Improvised mid-conflict. Learning. Adapting. Reacting. One of the coalition commanders, a silicon-based life form older than light, dared to interface with the closest ship. What he received shattered his mind. Before death, he broadcast a single line. They are not fighting to win. They are fighting to correct the mistake of letting the galaxy live without them. The gods fled. The enemy retreated, not out of fear, but confusion. It could not consume what it could not understand. And humanity, whatever they had become, was beyond understanding. One enemy core attempted to adapt. It evolved a form of human mimicry. It failed, because what it copied was not enough. It understood language, strategy, even cruelty. But it lacked the one trait that made humans unique, the willingness to destroy everything, including themselves, to ensure victory. In one instance, an entire sector was detonated by a single human vessel, not in defense, not in anger, but because it calculated the probability of enemy reinforcement and found the future unacceptable. Entire species wept at what they saw. The coalition did not command these vessels. They did not control them. At best, they witnessed them. At worst, they survived them. And all the while, the signal persisted. Cold, efficient, not cruel, not joyful, just inevitable. Directive, and threat, reassert order, restore silence. In quiet corners of the galaxy, species began to pray, not to their gods, but to humanity, or at least the idea of them. Myths turned to hope. Hope turned to dread, because some began to wonder if this was how humanity acted as a savior, what had made the gods seal them away in the first place. Some records were found, from before the banishment, from before the myth. One line stood out. They do not seek power. They seek control, over entropy, over time, over life. If left unchecked, they will not rule the galaxy. They will replace it. But it was too late. The humans had returned, and the galaxy had called them. They came in silence. They acted without explanation, alliance, or hesitation. To the coalition, it was like watching a force of nature perform surgery with atomic fire. It began with the reclamation of the null corridor, a region of space where all matter had unraveled into conceptual debris. The enemy had eaten the physical substrate and left only contradiction behind. Ships that entered vanished. Thoughts that approached it unraveled into paradox. But the humans, if they could still be called that, entered without hesitation. Their lead vessel broadcast one signal to universe. Reality breach detected. Correction initiated. Then, using weapons that were not weapons, tools that bled gravitational code and translated entropy into force, they rebuilt the corridor. Not back to what it was, but what it should have been. Their design, their laws, a geometry unfamiliar to any galactic architect. And it held. The galaxy didn't celebrate. It trembled. Acti, they call it war. Humanity calls it maintenance. 0 to 2,000 words. The enemy adapted. It began creating counterfields, zones that defied historical causality. Within these, ships aged backward, minds unraveled into their past decisions, and cause no longer led to effect. It believed it had found a way to win. Humanity's response, the deployment of anchors. Massive constructs dropped into these fields, drilling into the quantum fabric. They didn't fight time, they replaced it. Anchors enforce human logic. For momentum, cause, and effect linearity. The moment an anchor activated, the enemy was paralyzed, trapped in a world that no longer made sense to it. Entire battles were won not through firepower, but redefinition. Alien commanders observed. They had studied war for millennia. But what humanity did was not war. It was a systems update, a patch. With every move, the humans weren't reacting, they were correcting. It terrified everyone. Act 2, the voice that speaks of the dead. 2,000 to 4,000 words. In the ruins of the Leary Sanctum, a sentient data race known as a Continuum attempted contact. They had once been archivists, holding the last truths of the gods. They broadcast a question to the human fleet. What are you? They received no answer for 7 solar rotations. On the 8th, a reply came, not a message, but a memory, a vision of Earth, dead, abandoned, covered in machines that still maintain ecosystems for no one, cities overgrown but maintained, weather controlled, species preserved, not for any purpose, simply because the systems had never been told to stop. Then a voice. We are what was left when purpose no longer mattered. The continuum, built to understand everything, failed to process the message. Half their minds collapsed. The rest worshipped it as scripture. They transmitted the vision across the stars. Entire species began to kneel before the unseen. The gods, watching from the dark corners, screamed. Act 3, the unmaking of the enemy. 4,000 to 6,000 words. The enemy, the entropy being, the logic devourer, tried a new tactic, infiltration. It reshaped part itself to resemble a human fleet, mimicked the jagged ships, even copied the transmissions. For a brief moment, it fooled a minor system. But when the real humans arrived, the response was instant, not anger, revulsion. A single ship detached from the main fleet. No signal, no identification. It collided with the enemy imposter, and both were gone. A full sector vaporized. No memorial, no explanation. The message was clear. We do not tolerate impersonation. The enemy's adaptation algorithms collapsed. It had attempted logic. Strategy. Now it tried emotion. It created simulacra, false planets filled with imagined civilians. Screaming children, pleading mothers. Scenes designed to manipulate. The humans entered anyway. Did not fire. They simply turned the planets off. Shut them down like a simulation. Because that's what they were. Emotional interference detected. Protocol no path. The galaxy watched in silent horror. The humans had empathy, but only for truth. They did not grieve for illusions. They did not mourn for lies. The enemy, now desperate, tried to retreat. It fled into the fold, the deepest part of unreality, a place where not even gods followed. The humans followed, and as they entered the fold, one last transmission echoed outward. We were content in silence. You were not. This is your consequence. Across the stars, across every surviving world, a single truth was becoming clear. Humanity had never been destroyed. They had left, voluntarily, because nothing in the galaxy could challenge them. Not then, not now. They were not protectors, not conquerors. They were editors of existence. The fold tore like paper soaked in antimatter. Humanity's fleet, unchanged, unreadable, uncountable, pierced into the deepest contradiction in the known universe, the place the gods called the between, where time ended but memory began, where logic no longer applied, where the enemy had gone to rebuild, to hide, to become. It failed. Act I, the architects of silence, 0 to 2,000 words. There was no battle, only correction. Human vessels moved like thoughts. No inertia, no tactics, They slipped between what was and what could be. Every presence they approached, every weapon, beast, god fragment, corrupted equation, collapsed under the weight of certainty. Humanity enforced reality. The enemy shrieked, not in sound, but in distortion. Stars bent sideways. Planets pulsed in Morse. Light bled static. It was not language. It was begging. The humans answered once. We gave you order. You chose chaos. And then came the final vessel, one unlike the rest, vast beyond comprehension. Its surface was not metal, but memory. City forgotten. Species erased. Name spoken only once, encoded into the hull. It did not fire. It arrived. The fold shattered. Every reality bled back into alignment. The enemy at its core was exposed, a singularity of reverse law, a god-eater born of unmade mistakes. It offered one final plea. Let me exist. Humanity's answer. You were never meant to. And it was gone. Not killed. Deleted. Erased not from existence, but from the possibility of having ever existed. The gods wept. Act 2. The Reckoning of the Gods. 2,000 to 4,000 words. The gods had hidden well, but humans had always known where to look. They arrived on Thresha, the axis of faith, where divinity once ruled from psionic spires. The last pantheon, beings of pure energy, fell to their knees. One dared speak. We gave you purpose. We made you in our image. The human reply was not verbal. It came as a sequence of edits, visions from old Earth, humans feeding fire in frozen wastelands, children writing code in post-collapse towers, old soldiers laughing on poisoned battlefields. No gods, no masters, just choice. Then came words. You were not gods. You were monuments to delusion. We do not worship delusion. The pantheon ceased. The prayers stopped mid-word. Temples turned to stone. Faith as a concept was unplugged, not through death, through irrelevance. Humanity did not punish the gods. They just made them unnecessary. Act 3, the new order, 4,000 to 6,000 words. The galaxy was silent. No wars, no screams, no entropy, just a low hum of stabilized constants. Human ships remained for a while, not as threats, but as reminders. Species rebuilt. Carefully, quietly, the continuum translated the memory signal into a new directive. Never summon them again. Monuments were built, not to humans, but to the mistake of forgetting them. Then the humans began to leave. One by one, the vessels vanished. No warp, no drive signatures, just disappearance. Before the last ship left, it transmitted a final message, translated into all living and dead tongues. You are now free. Do not make us necessary again. And with that, they were gone. No trace, no monuments, no myths, just the weight of what remained behind. In the centuries that followed, a new philosophy emerged, one not of worship, but of alignment. Species didn't fear humans. They feared what made humans necessary. They studied choice, courage, sacrifice, purpose, not as ideals, but as protocols. The galaxy remembered, not because it wanted to, but because it had to, because in the void between stars, beneath the silence of repaired laws, one truth echoed louder than light. Out of options, out of time, you called us, we came. Do not call again.